Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be revealing my updated 2024 United States Senate election prediction. And for the month of May, I know that this has been delayed, and that's mainly because I've been busy for a while, and I had a couple missed opportunities for videos, and I'm sorry that I did not take advantage of those because I haven't been able to upload in a while, but I'm back, and I'm going to be trying to do the best that I can, in these next couple of weeks to bring you guys some content, but luckily it's not election year, so, and it's not even election season for this year, so anyways, getting that out of the way, I guess we'll just hop kind of right into it. We have a lot of new Senate news that's come out, a lot of, some news about, retirements. For example, Ben Cardin in Maryland is retiring. That's going to be an open that's going to be an open seat. It'll be a very interesting primary to watch on the Democratic side. And we also have some news for competitive races. So yeah, let's get right into it. We're going to start by filling out the safe states for the Democrats and Republicans, which will go to either party by over 15%. We don't need to worry about about any of these really. You can make some debates about some of these being likely, but for the most part, I would say these are pretty universally, these are, universally, we know how they're going to go. New Jersey, no Jersey, excuse me, I'm talking really fast, but New Jersey, uh, Bob Menendez is the Democratic incumbent. He is very scandal plagued, not a very popular senator, and I could see him winning by under 15 points, but it doesn't really seem like the GOP is putting up a strong challenge to him, so I'm going to mark that as safe. Maine, Angus King might retire. He is an independent, just like Bernie, who caucuses with the Democrats. They could both end up retiring. In Bernie's case, it wouldn't really matter. The race is still safety, but in King's case, it would matter. It would probably bring the race down to likely D. We could see, you know, Shelley Pingree or Sarah Gideon, maybe even Jared Golden run for this Senate seat, and that would probably be a likely margin. But I think that King, has said that he's going to run, and yeah, I would say that. That is probably what we are looking at. I think that we're going to see Angus King be reelected to a third term. So now we have 13 toss-up races. These are you know, they range from not being not so competitive to highly competitive races. We'll start off with the likely states for the. Should we do the Democrats or the Republicans first? We'll start with the Republicans. We'll mix it up a little bit. So likely states are going to be states that are decided by a margin between 5 to 15 points. It's a big it's a big I guess range. So some of these are going to be close to being highly competitive, others not so much. For example, Missouri, it's not really competitive, but Josh Hawley I don't think is going to win by over 15 points. He's not that popular nationwide. He is popular, somewhat in Missouri because it's a Republican state, but Democrats have a decent candidate, Lucas Coons, who can, put up a respectable showing. I think Hawley wins by 12 as of right now, which would be less than Trump. Won in 2020, and how much I think he'll win in the state by in 2024, because I think he will be the nominee. But DeSantis or Trump, I really think would have a similar margin in the state, or margin of victory in the state, that is. But yeah, Josh Hawley is going to win. I just think that right now it's better to characterize it as a likely state than a safe state. Florida, another state that's drifted pretty far to the right. Missouri and Florida have, that in common, that they used to be bellwether states, but have now become pretty, pretty strongly Republican. Missouri definitely more so than Florida. But Rick Scott is going to win. He's not that popular, but Democrats really don't have a candidate in this race. I think really their only hope is Stephanie Murphy, who could maybe make it a lean Republican margin, but even then, that would just really be, a distraction, kind of like how Ohio was for for the GOP in 2022, where Tim Ryan was running the best campaign possible, but just was not able to break through the red barrier that had encapsulated the state. So I think we would see Florida, if anything, just kind of be, a fool's gold for Democrats in 2024. Scott's not going to win by 19 like DeSantis did, but he's definitely not going to win by, he's not going to win by, 0.1% like he did in 2018. So, Yeah, he's the incumbent now, and even though he might not be too popular, and he might, there's been talk of a primary challenge, I really think none of that is that big of a deal. So now we're going to our final likely Republican state, and this is actually a Democratic held seat. It's West Virginia. I'm sure we all know about Joe Manchin, but he's in a lot of trouble for re-election. You see, when he was first elected to the Senate in 2010, following the death of longtime Democrat Robert Byrds, yeah, I think I got messed up there. But anyways, after Robert Byrds' death, Manchin was the governor, or he was governor before Byrds' death, but yeah, I'm overcomplicating things, but he ran for Senate in this special election. He won by 10%, a pretty underwhelming margin for a Democrat in West Virginia historically, but it was still, a victory nonetheless, and it was bigger than almost anyone had expected. In 2012, he went up against the same guy, John Race, who was a pretty bad candidate. And even though Mitt Romney won the state by nearly 27 points against Barack Obama, Manchin was able to win by 24 points. It was a massive ticket split. And, if you look at this 2012 map in general, you can really see, some big ticket splits. Like Indiana went to Romney but elected a Democrat. Nevada went to Obama but elected a Republican. Same case in West Virginia went to Romney, but it elected a Democrat. But then in 2018, a much bluer year overall. Democrats had a pretty unfavorable Senate map. They lost seats in North Dakota, Missouri, Indiana, and Florida. They were able to hold on to West Virginia, but Manchin really underperformed his previous performance. Now, yes, he was running against the Attorney General Patrick Morrisey, but Morrisey had a lot of baggage, and now that he's running for governor, in a crowded GOP field, I really don't think he's going to be that big of a liability to Republicans. I have no idea who's going to succeed Jim Justice in the governor's office, but I definitely know, what I think Jim Justice is going to be up to in the next year and a half, and that is senator. I really do believe, I mean, we know now that Jim Justice is running for Senate. I made a joke about it about a month ago, and actually at the end of April, he actually did declare his candidacy. So, I was only about a month off. But of course, that was an April Fool's joke, and that was all. But yeah, he's going up in the Republican primary against Alex Mooney, a representative from the northern part of the state. And it looks like it's going to be a pretty interesting primary to watch, but I think Jim Justice, as polling indicates, is, a clear favorite in the primary and in the general election. I think Manchin, being someone who's won before, you know, I think it would be best for the GOP if Manchin doesn't run, but I still think they beat him either way. I think Justice would win by 12 to 13 points. I think Mooney would win, not by nearly that much, but maybe like 6 or 7. I think Manchin's a strong candidate. He's going to outperform Biden by a lot in the state, but I really don't see him winning. I really don't see him winning re-election as of right now, but it is somewhat possible. That's why it's not safe, and it's only likely. Now for the likely Democratic states. Now some of these you can make debates about. New Mexico could be safe. Martin Heinrich, I think, is a decent incumbent, but I think he's a little overrated in terms of electability. He was first elected in 2012. To fill, I think it was Jeff Bingham's seat. He retired. He was a longtime senator from New Mexico. Heinrich won by about 6, which was kind of underwhelming, but it was a competitive race. He was running against a former congresswoman. And in 2018, this is what a lot of people say is, I think this is where a lot of people get that notion that Heinrich is this big overperformer. And yeah, he overperformed Michelle Lujan Grisham, which, at the time wasn't, it was impressive. Um, but Heinrich, was also in a freeway race, but with Gary Johnson, who was the Libertarian nominee for president in 2016. And so that definitely took away more Republican votes than it did Democratic votes. I'm sure that there were some, that voted for, some Democrats that voted for Johnson, but I don't think there were that many. And I think now that it really looks like it's going to be another two-way race with Heinrich, he's definitely going to win. And I think he'll slightly overperform Biden by like a point or two, but it's not going to be by, he's not going to win by over 20. So I think he, is in that 12 to 13 point range. Yeah. Virginia, this could be safe, just like Missouri, but I feel like, I know Tim Kaine's a very strong candidate and he won by 16 points in 2018. He usually overperforms over candidates down ballot, but it was also a blue wave year, and there is potential for him to face someone like Hung Kao or even Glenn Youngkin. I'd say Hung Kao is, a more, the more likely candidate for Republicans to put up in this, in this matchup. I think Glenn Youngkin has made it, pretty clear. He's already said he's not running for president. I think he's got a political future. I think he will run for president one day and may even run for Senate against Mark Warner in 2026. But I think 2024, it's a bit too early for Glenn Youngkin to jump into this race. I think, Hung Kao could, keep it somewhat close. He had a respectable performance against Jennifer Wexton in a House election last year, but I still think that either way, Tim Kaine is a clear favorite and he overperforms Biden by, a point or two. Our final likely state for either party is Pennsylvania, and it's likely D. Bob Casey is running for re-election. He is a very strong candidate. Usually, he overperforms, candidate over down ballot Democrats by a lot. He won by a whopping 17 points against Rick Santorum in 2006 when Santorum was the incumbent. I know 2006 was a big Democratic wave, but even Sherrod Brown in Ohio didn't beat Mike DeWine by nearly that much. He only won by 12. Well, not 12, but you know what I mean. It was still impressive, but it wasn't like Bob Casey's. Casey overperformed Obama in 2012, and he underperformed Tom Wolf in 2018, but he still won by 13 points against Lou Barletta, who is a pretty respected congressman from Scranton, or not Scranton, but the Scranton area. It was like northeastern Pennsylvania. I don't think it was quite Scranton was where his district was, but still. Um, I think that Bob Casey's really got this race, in the bag. You could see David McCormick, the Republican candidate who lost to Dr. Oz in 2022. Um, I think he's going to run. I think Doug Mastriano, the candidate, the nominee for governor, is going to run. I think either way, Casey wins. McCormick would pose a better threat to Republicans, but or for McCormick would you know, excuse me, my brain is kind of out of shape today, but yeah, McCormick would fare better against Casey, but not by that much. I think Mastriano makes the race basically safety. I wouldn't make it safety immediately if he was, the Republican nominee. I'd want to wait. I want to wait to see some more polling. There has been a little bit of preliminary polling in the state, but it definitely shows that McCormick performs better against Casey, but still ends up losing. So yeah, I think Casey is pretty safe, at least for right now, pun intended. So now we're down to 7 states. These are the most competitive ones. We have Nevada, Arizona, Montana, Texas, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I think these will be the most competitive states of the 2024 Senate election cycle. And yeah, we'll get into the lean states now. These will be the states that are decided that are decided from 1 to 5%. They're not, super, they're not super, they're not the most competitive, but they're definitely not likely. They are in the battleground category, and they could go for the other party if things go right for, the one side or the other. So we'll start off with the lone Republican or lone lean Republican state, and that is Texas. Now, Texas has gotten interesting recently because Colin Allred, a congressman from Dallas, has announced that he is running for the Democratic nomination for Senate to take on Ted Cruz. And I think Allred, he's not the best candidate imaginable. I think, you know, he would not do as well as Beto O'Rourke did in 2018, but that was also a blue wave year, and I think that he will, I think Allred will pose a strong challenge to Cruz if he does get the nomination. There's still potential for one of the Castro brothers to jump in the race, or even like Lizzie Fletcher get the nomination. But I think right now I would lean towards Colin Allred being the Democratic nominee, and I think he would do a decent job. I think he'd overperform Biden, but I still think barely. But I think, Texas is just not ready to flip yet. I think Democrats had a pretty bad turnout in Texas in 2022. And I think that while the Hispanic trends in the Rio Grande Valley are ultimately, not going to really matter, in the long term as to the state turning blue because the suburbs will keep shifting left. And, Allred, I think, would help with that since he's from the Dallas suburbs. But I think, in the short term, I think that the Rio Grande Valley shifts will, hinder the Democrats and it will make it very hard for them to win in Texas. I don't think we're going to see a blue Texas until, 2030s. Maybe in the next, maybe when this seat's up again in 2030, maybe Ted Cruz could lose. I could see that, but I think right now, it's a little too early. Democrats could win this race, but it's we're 18 months out from election day, and it's I guess a little less than that. But I think it's clear to say that Ted Cruz is the favorite in this race, even if he's not that strong of an incumbent. So the first lean Democratic state is Michigan. It's similar to Texas in the sense that it could go to the it could go to the GOP, or the opposing party, but everything would have to go right, and really nothing's indicating that it's not going that way right now. It's an open seat, so there's potential for Republicans here. Some rare potential. Debbie Stabenow, the incumbent, the Democrat, who served for in the Senate for over 20 years, is retiring, and it looks like Alyssa Slotkin, the congresswoman from Lansing, is going to be the Democratic nominee. The Republicans pretty much could, their nominee could be anybody. Could be Bill Huizenga. It could be James Craig. It could be Lisa McClain. I think McClain right now is the most likely nominee, but I could see it being someone else. I could see you know, Huizenga or Craig being the nominee. I could see Peter Meyer throwing his hat into the ring, but I don't really think he would win. I don't think he'd stand a chance, honestly. But yeah, I think Michigan right now, it's not a solid blue state. I think it's not as blue as 2022 indicated, but it's still, that was an extreme, case where you had some really flawed GOP candidates and some really good Democrats, and I think that the abortion referendum really helped Democrats in a way that it won't help them again in 2024 unless there is another abortion ballot. The abortion issue in general will help Democrats. I think that we saw that with the Wisconsin Supreme Court election, but um, I still think that Michigan is not as blue as it's not going to be a 10-point margin for Slotkin, but it's still going to be a relatively strong margin against any Republican right now. I think it'd be, she'd win by 4 to 5 points. And then we have Wisconsin. Now Wisconsin's a big question mark because it kind of depends on the Republican candidate. We know that Tammy Baldwin, the incumbent Democrat, is running for re-election, but she's not. She doesn't really have a clear opponent yet. It could be Mike Gallagher, the congressman from northeastern Wisconsin. He would be a decent candidate. We could also see Tom Tiffany, from the northwestern Wisconsin run. He's another congressman, but I think that he said that he would rather Gallagher run. But Gallagher doesn't really seem interested yet. I mean, I shouldn't say interested, but he hasn't made an official statement on the race. He said that he's interested, but he hasn't decided in favor or against it yet. I think he will be the nominee, but if it's not, probably Tom Tiffany. Either way, I think Baldwin, will outperform Biden. I think that she's a strong candidate. She's proven that in the past. She won by, 6 points against a pretty strong candidate in 2012, Tommy Thompson. And, you could argue that was because there was a strong, there was a really bad um, there were bad circumstances for the GOP, like a really crowded primary, but I think Baldwin would have won either way. She was a strong candidate then, and then in 2018, in a blue wave year, and against a really bad candidate, a really bad Republican, she won by 11 points. She's not going to win by that much. I think this will be her closest race yet, but I still think she is going to win. And if I sound kind of weird, I know I haven't mentioned this, but I'm feeling a little sick, so if I sound a little, raspy or, different than I usually do, um, that is why. So yeah, the final lean Democratic state is Nevada. This is another, pretty, clear decision for me. Jackie Rosen's a decent incumbent, not as strong as Catherine Cortez Masto, but she's not, bad by, in any sense of the word. And the GOP really has a laundry list of people that they could run, but the realistic options are not very, large. We have, or not, or at least not very good. The people who could win a primary. Brian Sandoval, the former governor of Nevada, has said no, he's not going to run. Adam Laxalt, who, I think, he was overhyped in 2022, but I don't think he was an absolutely abysmal candidate like some people call him. I think that he was just kind of, you know, weird, or not weird, but I just think he was flawed. I think that he was overhyped. I mean that his name, the fact that he had the Laxalt is his last name, and his grandfather was a U.S. senator from the same seat, really, made a lot of people, including myself, think he was stronger than he actually was. And Marco Mode, the sole Republican in Nevada's congressional delegation, is running for re-election. I think he would have been a decent candidate. The only real major candidate who's announced yet is Jim Marchant. And he was the nominee for Secretary of State in 2022, and he lost by more than Laxalt did. We can go to, the results here, but Cisco Aguilar beat him by a pretty strong margin, 2.2%. This was a classic Nevada margin, but for 2022, for Democrats in 2022 in Nevada, it was pretty good. It was a pretty good margin. So yeah, and this was a pickup from there was before this there was a Republican Secretary of State in Nevada. So Jim Marchant lost the GOP that statewide office. And I think that if he is the nominee, he will almost certainly lose. I shouldn't say certainly lose, because anything can happen in politics, especially in swing states. But I do not think he would be a good candidate for the GOP to run at all. Nor do I think Rick Harrison or Sam Brown or Joey Gilbert would be. I think all of them would be, pretty bad candidates. I really don't think that there is I really think that the list of candidates here is big, but none of them really stand out to me. Nevada is a state that had pretty, not great turnout in 2022. It wasn't terrible, but, it wasn't good turnout from Democrats, and yet they still had a really strong, stable coalition, I think, in a presidential year that will help Rosen and Joe Biden. So, yeah, I think that Rosen's a pretty clear favorite for re-election as of right now, even if it is, even if she's not going to win by an overwhelming amount. Now we have three toss-up states. These could go either way, but they're in the tilt category, which means they'll be decided by less than 1%. We'll start off with the easiest one for me to decide on as of right now, and I would say that's Arizona. Ruben Gallego looks like he is, even in a freeway race, going to win, this seat if the election was held today, which is how I, do my predictions. I do them on a monthly basis of how it would go if it was held, today, the day that I'm making the prediction. But even, when Kirsten Sinema is placed on the ballot, he's still winning. Now, yes, there are a lot of undecideds here, but it looks like even when there are more undecided, it looks like the higher percentage, or that a lot of these undecideds in these older polls are actually now voting, or breaking for Ruben Gallego. He's the first major candidate in the race. There is another candidate, Mark Lamb. He's a Republican from, I think he's the sheriff of Pinal County. He's pretty extreme. I don't think he would do well. Kari Lake would be an abysmal candidate. Blake Masters would be a terrible candidate. Juan Ciscomani, the representative from Tucson, the Tucson area, I guess, would be, but he doesn't want to run. He's still pretty, he's still a pretty, new to politics. Doug Ducey doesn't want to run. David Schweikert doesn't want to run. So I mean, really, the Republicans are in, between a rock and a hard place in Arizona, and I think that that's really really going to hurt them. I think that they could win it, based on a split, a third party presence from Kirsten Sinema, but right now it really looks like Gallego, is winning either way. And now we will go to the sole tilt Republican state, which will put the GOP in, their, in their majority, or give them the majority back with 51 seats, is Ohio. Now, Sherrod Brown's a really strong candidate. He's won in the past before, but as it stands right now, I think that the, partisan lean of Ohio is going to be too much for him to overcome. Now, can he win? Yes. But he has had, pretty strong performances before. But in 2018, he had basically the race handed to him from the moment that Josh Mandel, dropped out of the race in the Republican primary. Mandel was the guy who ran for Senate in 2022 and actually was the nominee against Brown in 2012. Now, yes, Mandel lost to Brown, but some may argue that some of that was the reason why he lost by so much was because of um, the third party candidate. But in 2018, Jim Renacci was not a strong candidate. He was someone who really could not fundraise, he could not campaign, and the GOP pulled out of the race. Before the fall campaign started, before Labor Day, even in 2018. And despite being expected to lose by double digits, he only lost by about 7 points. Now, 7 point, Sherrod Brown winning by 7 points in Ohio is very impressive, and it's a strong performance for a Democrat, no doubt. But it is still it is still kind of underwhelming given the circumstances. Now, we have a couple of potential they're not potential candidates, but we have some interesting news. Matt Dolan has obviously been in the race for a while. Bernie Moreno, who ran for Senate in 2022, he's a not ideal candidate for the GOP. He's announced that he's running, and he's made some pretty controversial statements. I think he'd lose to Brown, quite honestly, if he wins the primary, which is a possibility, but I don't think he will. And then you got the big one, Frank LaRose, the Ohio Secretary of State, who is, telling his donors and, his political allies that he is going to jump into the race soon. The announcement is expected by next month. And so, I think he will ultimately be the nominee. There's a chance that he won't. But I think right now LaRose is looking towards the Republican nomination for Senate, and I think he'd narrowly beat Brown. He would underperform. Brown will overperform any Democrat at the top of the ticket, which will be Joe Biden. And I think that he'll overperform by a lot. But I just think that given Ohio's you know, stubbornly red nature, I think that right now, it would be a mistake to not call this it would be a mistake on my part to not call this a Republican, flip. So that gives the GOP the majority, but we have one more race to cover, and that is the state of Montana. Now, Montana is very interesting because there is a Democrat as the incumbent here. Jon Tester. He's a very moderate Democrat, not to the likes of Joe Manchin or Kirsten Sinema. Well, I guess Sinema's not really a Democrat anymore, but still she caucuses with the party. But Montana is very interesting because Jon Tester, unlike people like Joe Manchin who have gone from whose margins have fluctuated, from really big to to pretty small. Tester's had a consistently narrow, string of victories, and it looks like that he's going to have some pretty stiff competition in 2024, but his candidates aren't, the Republican candidates aren't the best. You have Matt Rosendale, who's a pretty far right member of, the Freedom Caucus. Not that Montana isn't a conservative state, but it's more Democratic down ballot. And Ryan Zinke, who's the other congressman from the state, who is pretty scandal plagued and only won his seat by about 3 points, and the seat voted for Trump by like 7 in 2020. So neither of these candidates are very strong. Trump being on the ballot is going to make it harder for Tester to hold on because it's a presidential year. But given how stable his vote share has been, I really do think that right now, and considering the candidates, the candidate quality on the GOP side, I do think that Montana right now would remain blue if they get a better candidate like Tim Sheehy, the who I guess is this billionaire guy that Republicans have been trying to get on board for the race. I don't know how much stock I would put into his Senate campaign. Uh, you know, um, I don't know what I'm saying there, but yeah, I don't know how strong of a candidate he would be, but I think that he is right now. I think that right now Jon Tester is favored to win re-election, and so that would bring the map to a total, of 51 Republicans and 49 Democrats. There's really nothing different about this map from the one last month, but I wanted to put out an update for you guys, and I wanted to do it today because I did not want to put it off until we're 3 weeks into May. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Again, as I said, Republicans take back the Senate in my prediction, but it's a very narrow majority. It's very underwhelming, and Democrats could win, if they, say win Ohio or win Texas, and are able to, win the presidency and thus get a 50-50 tie, get a 50-50 tie, breaking or the vice president as their tiebreaker in a 50-50 Senate. I don't know what's going on with my words, but either way, what I'm trying to say here is that the Democrats can win the Senate. It's just the map's so unfavorable towards them. And I think right now they're on track to lose West Virginia and Ohio. But that could change. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching the video. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss some more content like this. Share the video with someone who you think would enjoy it. Check out my non-political channel, Interactor127, and my, comrades channel, GrowlingZoo666. And I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.